I'm Victoria, 32 years old, and for the past 3 years, I've been living a carefully constructed lie. Not the kind of lie that tears people apart, but the kind that protects your heart from those who would value your bank account more than your soul. The evening it all came to a head started simply enough. David and I sat in his silver BMW outside my modest apartment building, the engine purring softly as he held up an embossed invitation like it was a sacred artifact. The cream-colored cardstock announced dinner with his family at Romano's, undoubtedly the most exclusive and expensive restaurant in the entire city. "They're going to absolutely love you," David said, flashing that charming smile that had first caught my attention 3 years ago at a tiny coffee shop downtown. His confidence was infectious, but I felt the familiar weight of my secret pressing against my chest like a stone. I could have told him right then and there. I could have casually mentioned that I had $6 million sitting in various trust funds and investment accounts. I could have explained that my great-aunt Catherine, a brilliant investor and businesswoman who never married, had left me an inheritance that made his family's considerable wealth look almost quaint by comparison. Instead, I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and played the part I'd been perfecting for our entire relationship. "What if they don't think I'm good enough?" I asked, injecting just enough vulnerability into my voice to sound genuine. "Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you've ever felt that knot of anxiety about meeting your partner's family for the first time, hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Because this dinner became a masterclass in revealing people's true characters. My careful deception wasn't born from malice or entertainment. It came from painful experience and hard-won wisdom. You see, I'd learned the devastating lesson that money changes absolutely everything in relationships. My previous boyfriend, Marcus, had been perfectly content with our modest lifestyle, until he accidentally discovered a bank statement I'd carelessly left out. Suddenly, he became intensely interested in marriage, his eyes lighting up with dollar signs rather than genuine affection. The relationship before that had involved Jason, who started planning elaborate vacations and business ventures he expected me to fund, transforming from partner to dependent in the span of weeks. So when I met David at that unpretentious coffee shop, surrounded by students with laptops and the comforting aroma of fresh espresso, I made a calculated decision. I would be Victoria the marketing coordinator, earning a respectable but modest salary, not Victoria the millionaire heiress with investment portfolios and business partnerships. David fell in love with a woman who packed her own lunches in reusable containers, shopped at Target for clothes, and genuinely appreciated the small romantic gestures that didn't cost a fortune. He insisted on paying for everything because he genuinely believed I was struggling to make ends meet on my coordinator's salary. Those spontaneous weekend getaways to bed and breakfasts, the fancy dinners celebrating my small work victories, even helping me upgrade from my deliberately chosen shabby apartment to a slightly better one. He covered it all because he was being what he considered a gentleman. And honestly, I genuinely loved feeling cared for without the underlying suspicion that ulterior motives were driving his generosity. But meeting his family meant entering their carefully guarded world, and their world operated by rules I knew far too well from my own upbringing among the wealthy elite. Old money families possess an almost supernatural ability to detect what they dismissively call gold diggers from miles away. They have tests, some subtle and others bluntly obvious, designed to determine your worth as measured by breeding, connections, and family pedigree rather than character or accomplishments. I decided to give them exactly what they expected to find. The afternoon before our dinner, I spent hours shopping at discount stores I would normally never enter, searching for the perfect costume. I found a navy blue polyester blend dress that practically screamed, trying too hard on a limited budget. It was exactly wrong for Romano's in every possible way. Too casual for their dress code, too obviously cheap in its construction, too desperate in its attempt to look sophisticated. I paired it with shoes that pinched my feet uncomfortably, and a purse I'd discovered at a thrift shop, complete with a slightly broken clasp that I had to hold carefully to prevent it from spilling open. The transformation was complete when I examined my reflection in my bathroom mirror that evening. Gone was the confident woman who could casually purchase the entire restaurant if she desired. In her place stood someone desperately trying to impress her betters, someone who clearly didn't belong in their sophisticated circle of influence and privilege. David arrived precisely at 7 o'clock. His punctuality, one of the many qualities I genuinely loved about him. His eyes widened noticeably when he saw my carefully chosen outfit, and I caught the flash of concern before he buried it under kindness. "You look beautiful," he said, though I noticed the slight hesitation in his voice and watched him glance twice at my uncomfortable shoes. He was far too kind and well-mannered to mention that I looked dramatically underdressed for Romano's elegant atmosphere. "I wanted to look nice for your family," I said softly, adjusting the cheap earrings I'd bought specifically to complete this performance. "I know how important tonight is." The drive through the city felt different this particular evening. David seemed uncharacteristically nervous, continuously drumming his fingers against the leather steering wheel at every red light. I could sense his anxiety building as we drew closer to our destination. "Tell me about them again," I prompted gently, though he'd already described his family members countless times during our relationship. I knew their details by heart, but asking gave him something to focus on besides his obvious worry. His mother, Margaret, was a retired museum director with impeccable taste and intimidating cultural knowledge. His father, Robert, owned one of the city's most successful law firms, built through decades of careful networking and strategic partnerships. His sister, Jennifer, had married a prominent cardiologist and lived in an exclusive suburb with their 2 picture-perfect children. "They can be somewhat intense," David admitted, as we pulled into Romano's valet parking area, where uniformed attendants rushed to open our doors. "They're not particularly used to sharing my attention, if I'm being honest." He squeezed my hand reassuringly. "But once they truly get to know you, they'll absolutely see what I see. Someone remarkable." The restaurant was exactly as intimidating as I remembered from my previous visits in my actual capacity as a major investor. Crystal chandeliers cast elegant light across mahogany paneling that gleamed with decades of careful maintenance. Waiters moved with practiced precision in crisp white jackets, carrying dishes that cost more than most people's weekly paychecks. The maitre d' recognized me immediately, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly. But he played his part with perfect professionalism when David provided his family name for the reservation. "Right this way, sir," he said smoothly, leading us through the dining room. We were escorted to a prominent corner table where 3 impeccably dressed people sat waiting in judgment. Margaret's silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and she wore what I immediately recognized as a Chanel suit that probably cost more than my fake salary for several months. Robert looked distinguished in his navy blazer with subtle pinstripes, every inch the successful attorney. Jennifer appeared as though she'd stepped directly from a country club fashion catalog, her jewelry catching the light with calculated sparkle. They stood as we approached, and I watched carefully as their eyes took in every detail of my appearance. Margaret's smile was polite and practiced, but it didn't reach her calculating eyes. Jennifer's gaze lingered on my discount dress with poorly concealed disappointment bordering on horror. Robert shook David's hand warmly before turning to me with the professional courtesy he'd perfected over decades of client meetings. "You must be Victoria," Margaret said, extending a perfectly manicured hand with nails shaped into elegant ovals. "David has told us quite a lot about you." Her tone strongly suggested he hadn't told them nearly enough of the right information. I slipped fully into my carefully prepared character immediately, letting my voice rise slightly with manufactured nerves. "It's so incredibly wonderful to finally meet you all. This place is absolutely incredible. I've never been somewhere so fancy in my entire life." I widened my eyes as I looked around with exaggerated awe, playing up my supposed overwhelm at their sophisticated world. The family exchanged meaningful glances they assumed I was too naive to notice. Jennifer's lips twitched with what might have been cruel amusement or superior satisfaction. "Romano's is one of our absolute favorite spots," she said with practiced smoothness. "We thought it would be appropriately nice for such a special occasion." David pulled out my chair with characteristic gentleness, and I made a small production of being impressed by the gesture, as though such courtesy was foreign to my supposedly humble background. "Such a gentleman," I gushed, allowing my voice to carry just slightly too loud for the intimate setting. Several nearby diners glanced our way, and I caught Margaret's almost imperceptible wince at my lack of dining room decorum. As we settled into our seats, an impeccably dressed waiter appeared with menus bound in supple leather, each one probably worth more than my entire costume. I held mine as though it might bite me, squinting dramatically at the prices listed in small, elegant script. "Oh my," I whispered, not quite softly enough to avoid being overheard. "These prices are quite substantial." I let genuine-seeming anxiety creep into my voice, as though the numbers on the page represented an insurmountable financial burden. "Don't worry about that," Robert said with practiced kindness, though I noticed how his jaw tightened ever so slightly. "This is our treat tonight. We want you to feel comfortable." David reached across the pristine white tablecloth for my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I told you not to worry about the cost, sweetheart. Just order whatever appeals to you." I let my eyes glisten slightly with gratitude that bordered on becoming tears. You're all so generous. I just want to make a good impression. My voice wavered just enough to suggest I was genuinely overwhelmed by their supposed kindness and the elegance of the setting. Margaret leaned forward with what I'm certain she believed was motherly warmth, though her eyes remained cold and calculating. Tell us about yourself, dear. David mentioned you work in marketing somewhere downtown? Oh, yes, I replied quickly, ducking my head with manufactured modesty. At Henderson & Associates. It's really not anything glamorous, just coordinating campaigns for local businesses, small accounts mostly. Nothing like what David does with his important corporate clients. I paused, glancing at David adoringly before adding, he says I'm good at my job, but honestly, some days I wonder if I'm truly smart enough for the business world. It can all be so complicated. The family's expressions grew noticeably more relaxed as I painted myself as harmless, slightly dim, and clearly out of their league. Jennifer actually smiled for the first time since we'd been seated, her shoulders losing their tense set. I'm sure you do just fine, she said with the kind of patronizing encouragement one might offer a child. Not everyone needs to work in high-stakes environments. Have you ever had to bite your tongue during a family dinner to keep the peace? Sometimes staying quiet and observing is the smartest strategic play you can make. The evening was about to become very interesting. As dinner progressed through its carefully orchestrated courses, the family's true nature began emerging like a photograph developing in chemical solution. Margaret ordered wine without bothering to ask my preference, selecting a bottle that cost more than most people earned in a week. When the sommelier poured my glass with practiced flourish, she commented with false helpfulness, "This is a particularly excellent vintage, very smooth for someone not accustomed to quality wines." I sipped it carefully, pretending to be intimidated by its complexity and unable to identify the subtle notes that I actually recognized immediately from years of wine education. "It's very nice," I said with deliberate uncertainty. "Much fancier than what I usually drink at home." Jennifer laughed, a tinkling sound that held no genuine warmth. "What do you usually drink if you don't mind my asking?" "Oh, you know," I replied with carefully manufactured embarrassment. "Whatever happens to be on sale at the grocery store. David keeps trying to educate my palate, but I think I'm absolutely hopeless." I laughed self-deprecatingly, watching as they exchanged satisfied glances. The test had officially begun, and I intended to fail it spectacularly, at least until the perfect moment for revelation arrived. What they didn't know was that their judgment was about to backfire in the most publicly humiliating way imaginable. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't anger or confrontation. Sometimes it's simply being successful enough that their opinions become completely irrelevant, and watching their carefully constructed faces as they realize exactly how catastrophically they've misjudged the situation. The moment of revelation was approaching, and I could hardly contain my anticipation.